envy you especially. But we're all fortunate to have this opportunity to experience this film together on celluloid in a spectacular space with 1,000 other people. There's truly no better way. It's a privilege to be here to speak to you, and I want to thank the Los Angeles Conservancy for inviting me, especially Sarah Land and Jack Fields. Now, From Russia with Love was the second James Bond film, but I would say that even more than the first, this is the one that made Bond Bond. Dr. No had set much of the template for the character and the series, but From Russia with Love filled it out. It added elements that weren't in Dr. No, and it cemented, it doubled down on things that we think of as iconic about James Bond movies. It had the first pre-title opening sequence, the first title song, in this case over the closing credits, evocative location filming once again, this time in Istanbul, and the first appearance of Desmond Llewellyn as Q. And also the first, yes, we all love Q, and also the first real appearance of Spectre in Blofeld. Sean Connery is quite a bit smoother in the role this time out, and John Barry's score sets the mold for the series. The original Bond theme was by Monty Norman, but Barry is the one who orchestrated it into the Bond sound that we all know and love on Dr. No, and then he was hired to compose the complete score for this film, and 10 more Bond pictures up to the living daylights. To say his music is an important part of the James Bond universe is just a massive understatement. His Bond theme orchestration is still one of the most recognizable pieces of film music around the globe. Just those 4 notes, thrilling in every arrangement, conjuring suspense, excitement, danger, movement, playfulness. We just never tire of it, or at least I never tire of it. From Russia with Love was published in 1957 as Ian Fleming's 5th Bond novel. The book sold well, but then in 1961, President John F. Kennedy included it on a list of his 10 favorite books, alongside more highbrow works. Public interest soared, book sales skyrocketed, and that in turn helped spur Cubby Broccoli and Harry Saltzman to start production quickly on their first Bond movie. Saltzman was a Canadian producer who had optioned the rights to the Bond novels from Fleming, but had been unable to find a distributor. Broccoli was an American producer based in London, who meanwhile approached Saltzman to try and buy the rights for himself. They wound up joining forces and forming Eon Productions, and they struck a distribution deal with United Artists. They couldn't adapt the first Bond novel, Casino Royale, because those rights had been sold separately to someone else. So they chose Dr. No, the 6th novel, because they felt it would offer the most bang for their limited buck of a budget, which was $1 million. Dr. No was directed by Terrence Young, a very urbane fellow who was greatly responsible for shaping the Scottish, working class Sean Connery into the suave and seductive 007, on camera and off. Dr. No made Connery a household name, and his success even inspired Ian Fleming, who did visit the set of this film, to give the character some Scottish ancestry in the next novels. Dr. No was screened at the White House, and the story goes that JFK encouraged the producers to make From Russia with Love as the second film. It had twice the budget of Dr. No, and it remained one of the most faithful adaptations of the Bond novel. Terrence Young was back to direct, and Peter Hunt returned as film editor. And I can't stress enough how important those two men were in sculpting Connery's portrayal and the entire world of James Bond on screen. Hunt would edit the first 5 movies and then get a chance to direct the 6th, Her Majesty's Secret Service, my favorite. But his work on From Russia with Love is really exemplary, especially his cutting of the fight on the train, which is still one of the most thrilling fight scenes in any James Bond movie. Hunt also had his hands full in the editing room reshaping the entire construction of the story. He said that 3 months before the film's release, with reshoots still underway after a chaotic, extremely out-of-sequence shooting schedule, that the edit was feeling incoherent. So, as he put it, quote, "I started to fight with the film. I loved fighting it. I had to make it work." He ingeniously reordered several early major sequences in order to make the story easier to follow, and used all sorts of added visual tricks to make those changes work. And that, in turn, wound up creating, really in an arbitrary way, the first pre-credit sequence, simply because it was the only way that the opening scene we're about to see would really make any sense. If not for all this heavy tinkering, we might never have had the pre-credit scenes that we've anticipated in every Bond movie ever since. Now, just a few words about the rest of the cast. This film boosted the great Robert Shaw's career considerably. He at first turned down the role of Grant because he thought the script was rubbish, his word. But luckily, his wife convinced him otherwise. Daniela Bianchi was an Italian model who had been a runner-up in the Miss Universe pageant. She'd only made a few movies, and the producers had her test for the role of Tanya by playing the scene where she first meets James Bond in a bedroom. Now, the interesting thing here is that every succeeding actor who has auditioned for the role of James Bond has had to play that scene for his audition. It captures the charm, the humor, seductiveness, and menace of the character, and it requires an actor to figure out how to balance all those things. And each of the 6 Bond actors has balanced them in his own way. Michael Wilson, who's been producing the series with his half-sister Barbara Broccoli for the last few decades, he said, anyone who can bring that scene off is right for Bond. It's tough to do. Lottie Lenya was a German actress and cabaret star who had just been nominated for a Best Supporting Actress Oscar. She was a very glamorous personality in real life. Nothing whatsoever like her character here, Rosa Clem. And finally, the part of Karen Bay was played by Pedro Armendariz, a very fine Mexican actor who had been a star in both Mexico and Hollywood. As filming started, Pedro learned that he had cancer and not long to live. But he was determined to finish this film because he wanted to leave money to his family. So they altered the schedule to shoot all his close-ups up front in a 2-week period. Afterward, he flew to LA, he checked into the UCLA hospital, and then one day, using a gun that he had smuggled in, he took his own life. Now, this happened before the rest of the film had even finished production. So, a very tragic ending, but the performance that he left us with, that you're about to see, is really endearing and will stay with you, I think. On another poignant note, President Kennedy did see his favorite Bond novel put to film, but it turned out to be the last movie he ever saw. From Russia with Love was screened at the White House on November 20th, 1963, one day before Kennedy departed for Texas and 2 days before he was assassinated in Dallas. The movie had opened in the UK a month earlier, and it would be released in the US the following spring. It doubled the box office of Dr. No, and it set the stage for Goldfinger, the first true blockbuster Bond movie. But From Russia with Love incorporates a unique Cold War spy era realism, which is why it's my personal favorite of Connery's films. And now I'm going to sit down and enjoy it with you. So here we go. Sean Connery, the original James Bond 007, and From Russia with Love.